Saint Theotonius was born in northern Portugal in a town called Ganfei around the year 1082. His parents were wealthy noblemen, renowned for their piety. Today, a chapel dedicated to Saint Theotonius stands on the site of his birthplace. At the time of his birth, Portugal was only a small fraction of what it is today, being only a subservient county of the kingdoms of Leon and Castile. To the south, the Moors occupied the entire southern part of the Iberian Peninsula and made many raids into the Christian countries. The political center of Portugal at the time was Coimbra, being the residence of the ruling Count Henry of Burgundy and his wife Dona Teresa, the illegitimate daughter of the King of Leon. When he was 10 years old, the uncle of Theotonius, Don Cresconio, was made bishop of Coimbra and took the young Theotonius with him to that city to begin his priestly studies and formation. Here, he was entrusted to the care of a holy seminarian, Don Tello, who was later to become the principal founder of the Canons Regular of the Holy Cross. After the death of Bishop Cresconio in 1098, Theotonius was now 16 years old. He went to Viseu, where another uncle was prior to the Cathedral chapter of Sancta Maria. The Cathedral chapter was a body of secular or diocesan priests living a common life in the cathedral and served as advisors to the bishop. Here, Theotonius continued his studies toward the priesthood and received the minor orders. When he served as porter, his biographer adds curiously that Theotonius, as keeper of the keys, guarded vigilantly against any animals roaming into the church. Apparently, in former times, this seems to have been a recurring problem. When ordained a priest, Theotonius dedicated himself principally to the ordinary pastoral care of souls. He was a man of penance, avoiding luxury, pride, ambition, and the pleasures of the world. He even denied himself things that were permissible, such as a bed, a chair, or even a footstool in his room upon which he might rest or sit down. He slept only a few hours every night on the hard floor. He wore a penitential shirt and chains. His holiness, especially his moral purity and generosity toward the poor, was universally acknowledged by all of Viseu. Therefore, upon the death of the uncle of Theotonius, the Bishop of Coimbra found himself inundated with many petitions from the city of Viseu, asking that Theotonius be chosen as successor to the prior of the Cathedral chapter, that is, the highest-ranking ecclesiastical office of the city, subject only to the authority of the bishop himself. Knowing from personal acquaintance the upright and pious character of Theotonius, the bishop consented to these requests. Theotonius was 30 years old at the time. Under the weight of responsibility as chapter prior, he diligently cared for the worthy celebration of the liturgy in all the churches. He renewed the sacred places. He saw to it that the vestments were replaced with new ones when they were worn out. He gave proofs of his paternal love for the clerics, which won for him the esteem and confidence of all. But above all, he concerned himself with the poor, whom he generously served and helped. Around this time, the Count and Countess began petitioning for the restoration of the episcopal see of Viseu, which had been wiped out by the invasions of the Moors, and they proposed Theotonius as its bishop. In order to escape this fate, Theotonius quickly resigned his office as prior and set off on a pilgrimage to the Holy Land. After about a year's absence, he returned to Portugal and resumed his work as a simple priest and chapter member in Viseu. When his successor as prior to the Cathedral chapter went to meet him with the intention of handing over his office, Theotonius refused and exhorted him, "Beloved brother, continue to exercise your office. I seek nothing more than to be a simple priest and announcer of the marvels of God to my brethren." Theotonius had a great love for the Blessed Mother, and celebrated a Mass in her honor every Saturday. Every Friday he celebrated a Mass for the poor souls, and made a procession to the cemetery. Many noble families participated in these processions as well, and donated very large sums to him as the presiding priest. However, Don Theotonius would quietly distribute these proceeds to the poor. Though he was greatly esteemed by the nobility, Theotonius did not allow these attentions to keep him from preaching the truth. On one occasion, he was about to begin Holy Mass in honor of Our Lady on a Saturday, when the Countess, who was now called Queen Teresa, had a message sent saying that she was tired, and she asked him to say the Mass quickly. Theotonius replied simply, "Tell the Queen that I will not abbreviate the Mass because she is tired. There is another, far nobler Queen in heaven, my Lady and hers, whom today, Saturday, we remember, and whom I desire to honor in this Mass with the greatest reverence and devotion. If the Queen does not wish to stay, she is free to leave." Upon receiving this response, Dona Teresa devoutly participated in the entire Mass, and afterwards, with sincere contrition, she acknowledged her fault, asking Theotonius for a penance. Ever since his first pilgrimage to the Holy Land, his heart burned with a desire to return again. Therefore, in 1126, Theotonius departed on a second pilgrimage to Jerusalem. During the voyage, a violent storm threatened the lives of all. Knowing Theotonius as a priest and a man of God, the sailors and passengers turned to him for the help of his prayers. He suggested that they repent of their sins and sincerely forgive from their heart all who had injured them, so that God would have mercy on them. After this exhortation, he prayed with them, and very soon the wind calmed, the waves relaxed, and the sun shone. Having arrived in the Holy Land safely, he entered Jerusalem with a cross on his back, as was the common practice for pilgrims. Throughout his stay, especially at Calvary, he meditated, prayed, and wept with great devotion. He relived the mysteries of the life of Jesus from his birth to his passion, death, and resurrection, visiting the principal holy places. But his greatest devotion was to the Passion of Christ. This devotion would have a providential influence on the spiritual charism of the order he was later to co-found, the Order of the Canons Regular of the Holy Cross. While in Jerusalem, he stayed with the fervent young community of the Canons Regular of the Holy Sepulcher. These religious, edified by his piety, asked him to join their order. Theotonius was very much attracted to the proposal and responded, "Brothers, I would gladly stay here, but I have commitments in my own land. I shall go back to Portugal, but I hope, by the grace of God, to return again to Jerusalem to finish here my days of pilgrimage on earth." The return was never to be, for God had a different mission awaiting his humble servant in Portugal. On his return to Portugal, Don Theotonius first went to Coimbra, where he met his former tutor, Don Tello, who had by now already served many years as archdeacon of the diocese. Don Tello had gathered 10 other men with the intention of founding a new religious order. They needed only one more to correspond to the number of the 12 apostles. Though he was reluctant to abandon his plans to enter the Canons Regular of the Holy Sepulchre in Jerusalem, Don Tello prophetically argued that Theotonius' presence was more required in the West, where religious life was sorely in need of renewal. In fact, today, in the liturgical celebration of St. Theotonius, he is called the restorer of religious observance. Theotonius eventually saw in Don Tello's plea the will of God. He therefore disposed of his inheritance, giving 1/3 to the poor, 1/3 to the diocese, and 1/3 for the needs of the new monastery. He then joined the other 11 founders. The cornerstone of the monastery of Santa Cruz was laid on the vigil of Saints Peter and Paul, June 28, 1131. Construction was begun in honor of the Holy Cross and Mary, the Mother of God. On Ash Wednesday, February 24, 1132, in the presence of the king and a great multitude of people, the bishop gave the habit of St. Augustine to the new Canons Regular. They were now a total of 72, for 60 candidates had since joined the original 12 founders. That same day, the chapter for electing the prior of the new monastery took place. The brothers unanimously chose Don Theotonius, who at first refused, but then submitted his will in obedience to the will of his brethren. Don Theotonius became the contemplative, spiritual leader and guide of his brethren. Even in the midst of his duties, he remained a contemplative. When he was not praying or fulfilling some duty as prior, he was usually seen with a spiritual book in his hand. Besides the divine office and the common prayers of the community, he prayed the entire Psalter of 150 psalms every day, praying 50 for the poor souls, 50 for grave sinners, and 50 for the Church and her hierarchy. In his humility, he never accepted the title of abbot, nor the episcopal insignia which went with his office. For this reason, he is represented in most images with the episcopal mitre at his feet. His first biographer, an anonymous contemporary religious of the community, says that while others praise many things in him, such as his humility, his sanctity, and the ardor of his faith, the one virtue which most impressed him was the strong bond of charity that united Theotonius with the brethren. He took great care to tend to the sick, allowing them many dispensations from the rule and diet, but he himself accepted no special treatment when sick. During these first years of the monastery, Don Alfonso Enrique was regaining territory from the Moors and establishing Portugal as an independent nation. Don Theotonius served as a valued counselor to the king in these endeavors, and supported him with the prayers, vigils, and penances of the monastery. In 1139, on the eve of a key battle against 5 Moorish kings, Don Alfonso had a vision of Christ crucified and was assured of victory. At this battle, the Battle of Orique, Don Alfonso arose victorious and attributed his victory to Christ crucified and the prayers of Theotonius and the canons of the Holy Cross. From this point forward, Don Alfonso was declared king by his knights and noblemen, which was recognized some years later by the Holy See. On his shield, he represented the 5 shields of the Moorish kings in the form of a cross. and 30 white spots on each seal to represent the 30 silver coins for which Christ was betrayed. This seal was later modified because the 30 spots were difficult to work into smaller seals. King Alfonso held St. Theotonius in profound veneration for his virtues, and was also keenly aware of how much the order and its prior could contribute toward the unity of the newborn nation. The king himself became a member of the Third Order, and on September 14, 1136, in the presence of the court, the nobles, the chapter, and the religious of the monastery, King Alfonso publicly received the white linen surplice of the Canons Regular from the hands of Theotonius. When he died, the king was buried in the monastery of Santa Cruz in Coimbra. Don Alfonso chose Theotonius as his confessor and spiritual director, confiding to him all the difficult endeavors he undertook. The anonymous biographer asserts, "Every time the king undertook great things, he would always come to the servant of God and very intently recommend his person and soul to the prayers of the saint." As the lands were gradually reconquered from the Moors, Theotonius sent many of his canons to different regions to re-evangelize the nation. The king built many monasteries and churches for the order and offered them his protection. Nevertheless, many of the canons of this era were martyred for the faith during the raids of the Moors. As one example, in the year 1140, the Moors besieged and attacked the castle of Leiria. The canons who were there to evangelize were captured and martyred for their faith. During the same year, Theotonius, along with King Alfonso, consecrated the entire country of Portugal to the Holy Archangel Michael. As a token of the gratitude and friendship he felt for the prior of Santa Cruz, Don Alfonso Enrique became the principal benefactor of the monastery. But Don Theotonius never allowed this friendship between himself and the royal family to degenerate into subservience, even offering correction when circumstances merited it. For instance, when Don Alfonso took the city of Seville from the Moors, his soldiers took captive and enslaved a tribe of Christians called Mozarabs, who had been subjected under the Muslims, more than 1,000 men, not counting their wives and children. As soon as he heard this, Theotonius was moved with compassion, and having on only 2 other occasions ever departed from the cloister, he went out to meet the king and the whole army with burning zeal, saying, "O king and all noblemen who are sons of Holy Mother Church, do you subject your brothers to the condition of slaves and servant girls? By doing this you sin against the Lord your God." Hearing these words, beginning with the king, they dismounted from their horses, and they kissed the hand of Theotonius in sincere repentance. The captives were freed, and Theotonius allowed a great multitude of them to remain on monastery grounds, providing them with food and the basic necessities for many years. Theotonius further founded within the monastery a hospice to receive pilgrims and the sick, whom he himself served, along with the help of the other brothers. Already during Don Theotonius' life, many miracles and extraordinary events were attributed to him. When Queen Mafalda's life was endangered during childbirth, he was called to her bedside, and through his blessing saved both her life and the life of the child. King Alfonso was also cured from a persistent and life-threatening delirium through the blessing of the saint. The contemporary biographer adds that very often he had seen sick brethren restored to health through the intercession and prayers of Theotonius. Several episodes of exorcism are also mentioned in the life of Theotonius. When Don Theotonius had been prior of the monastery of Santa Cruz for 20 years, he began to suffer a prolonged and painful illness, which greatly diminished his physical strength. He was 70 years old, and felt the need to prepare for his final departure for the heavenly Jerusalem. He called the members of the community together and informed them of his weakness and of his great desire to prepare himself for his final encounter with God. His wish was respected, and his nephew, Don Juan Theotonius, was chosen to take over his practical duties. Don Juan relied frequently on the wise counsels of his uncle. Informed of Don Theotonius' resignation, Pope Hadrian IV, by means of a breve, granted Theotonius the use of the episcopal insignia, that is, the mitre, the crozier, and the ring, and the faculties to give the pontifical blessing to the people on solemn feasts. 1 year after his resignation as prior, in 1153, Pope Alexander III sought to appoint him Bishop of Coimbra. But, as before on more than one occasion, Theotonius refused the episcopal office. Free from the obligations as prior, Don Theotonius spent his time in continual prayer and reading. When he was not praying, he was found occupied with the simplest chores, such as sweeping the corridors. He suffered from this painful illness for 10 years. Just before his death, his biographer recounts that there appeared a great circle of stars, which filled the cloister, and the rays of the stars fell about Theotonius to the admiration of all. It is for this reason he is often pictured with a globe of stars in his hand or at his feet. Theotonius died on Friday, February 18, 1162. He was 80 years old. King Alfonso, who accompanied him in his last moments, remarked, "His soul will be in heaven before his body is in the tomb." Theotonius was held in such great veneration, and so many graces were obtained by his intercession, that many, beginning with the king himself, urged for his canonization. The process was one of the fastest in history of the Church. On the first anniversary of his death, February 18, 1163, he was canonized by the Provincial Council of Portuguese bishops in Coimbra, which was the norm at the time. The canonization was approved and confirmed shortly thereafter by Pope Alexander III. More than 360 years after his death, the body of St. Theotonius was exhumed and found to be incorrupt. 50 years later, it was again exhumed and showed signs of decay, though it still exuded a sweet fragrance. The Order of Canons Regular of the Holy Cross continued to grow throughout Portugal, but never extended beyond this realm. The order became a center of learning and culture for Portugal, and from its beginning was influential in the formation of Portugal as a Catholic nation. The famous University of Coimbra was established definitively in that city in order to be near the monastery of Santa Cruz and its learned canons. For 300 years, until the order's extinction in 1834, the prior of the Holy Cross was always the chancellor of the university. During the years of secularization in Europe, there was a great persecution of the Church. In 1834, the Portuguese government suppressed all monasteries and convents and confiscated their properties. Since the Order of the Holy Cross had communities exclusively within Portugal, unlike other orders which were present also in other countries, the order was extinguished. In the early 1970s, however, a spiritual movement was growing in Austria, which promoted an intimate collaboration between angel and man for the salvation of souls, for the spiritual renewal of the Church, and especially to spiritually support endangered priests. It was the Opus Sanctorum Angelorum, or the work of the holy angels. A group of priests from this movement approached the Holy See with the intention of founding a new religious order with a special devotion to the Passion of Christ and to the holy angels. Rather than founding a new order, they were directed by the Holy See to look into restoring an extinct order which had a similar spirituality, since it was possible to restore an order whose last member had died within 100 years. The Order of the Holy Cross of Coimbra, Portugal, was one of many to be studied, and found to be uniquely similar in spirituality to the Opus Sanctorum Angelorum. Like the Opus Sanctorum Angelorum charism, the original order had a special devotion to both the Holy Cross and the holy angels. Even a second Mass in honor of St. Michael the Archangel was celebrated every evening in the original monastery. Furthermore, it was discovered that despite the secularization of the country and the extinction of all religious orders in Portugal in 1834, one faithful canon of the order continued to reside in a small village, ringing the church bells, singing the office, and keeping the rule of the order until he died in 1903, which was within the 100-year time frame for restoring the order. His name was Don Joaquim de Boa Morte, or Father Joachim of the Good Death. He died in the odor of sanctity, and his tomb continues to be venerated and adorned today with candles and flowers. Due to the remarkable correspondence between the Order of the Canons Regular of the Holy Cross and the spiritual movement Opus Sanctorum Angelorum, in 1979, the Congregation for Religious and Pope John Paul II formalized the restoration by decree and granted the privilege to introduce into the order a special devotion to the holy angels according to the proven tradition of the Church. In God's merciful and wise providence, the holy Marian bishop, Don João Venanzio of Leiria, Fatima, requested permission to enter the order, which was soon to be restored. Bishop Venanzio was the first to receive permission from the Holy Father to make his solemn vows on Holy Thursday evening, May 22, 1979, in the newly restored Order of the Canons Regular of the Holy Cross. He was appointed the first Prior General of the restored order for a term of 3 years. He held this office until 1984, and passed away the following year on August 2, 1985, the feast of Our Lady of the Angels. Today, the Order of the Canons Regular of the Holy Cross has houses and monasteries throughout the world. Austria, Germany, Portugal, Italy, Brazil, Mexico, India, the Philippines, and the United States. The Mother House is a 9th century castle located in Silz, Austria, 20 minutes east of Innsbruck. Since the castle was built on solid rock, it has always been called St. Petersburg, or the Castle of St. Peter. Aggregated to the order is a community of religious sisters, the Sisters of the Holy Cross. The sisters were first approved in 1967 as a pious union of the faithful with private vows. They prayed, sacrificed, and supported priests. They were erected in 2002 as an institute of religious life with public vows. The spirituality of the Order of the Canons Regular of the Holy Cross, the Sisters of the Holy Cross, and the Opus Sanctorum Angelorum is based on four fundamental directions. The adoration of God, especially in the Most Blessed Sacrament. The contemplation of God's Word and His salvific works. Making expiation for the sins of the world, especially for the sanctification and salvation of priests. The members commemorate weekly the Passio Domini, that is, the Passion of our Lord, every Thursday night and Friday afternoon, compassionating with Jesus in His agony and on the cross. From adoration, contemplation, and expiation springs forth the call to mission. The special mission of the Order of the Canons Regular of the Holy Cross is to spread the knowledge of the powerful presence and help of the holy angels through preaching retreats and missions. The Order especially promotes a church-approved consecration to the holy angels, through which men can collaborate more intimately with the holy angels for the spiritual needs of the Church. Lay persons may also join the confraternity of the Holy Guardian Angels under the direction of the Order. The mission of the Sisters is to support the priests in their apostolate through accompanying them on retreats and through secretarial and administrative and domestic tasks. The Sisters have the spiritual mission of making expiation and interceding for priests. The Order is dedicated to the solemn and reverent celebration of the liturgy, and to a strong and unwavering fidelity to the magisterium of the Church. In Anápolis, Brazil, the Order has its own international seminary, Institutum Sapientiae, dedicated to Mary, the seat of wisdom. If you would like more information on the Order of the Canons Regular of the Holy Cross, or on how to become a member of Opus Sanctorum Angelorum, please contact us. And may Saint Theotonius and the holy angels be for us both a model and aid in our efforts to grow in personal holiness, to build up the Church, and to work for the salvation of souls.